So with 5 rounds, I think, now out the way in the Supercars Championship, Scott McLaughlin, obviously after 4 consecutive wins in a row, is now leading the championship quite comfortably. But I think the story so far of the championship is the consistency of David Reynolds and Erebus Motorsport. They are sitting third in the championship behind Scott McLaughlin and 2016 champion Shane Van Gisbergen. So I think now is as good a time as any to look back on Erebus Motorsport and how they've risen and how far they've come since they joined the category back in 2013. Now, I also need to apologise for my voice. I've got a bit of a cold at the moment, but getting into it, 2013 was the beginning of the new gen Supercars era with the car of the future chassis being introduced, which allowed more manufacturers into the category. Of course, Nissan joined in 2013, and also Mercedes-Benz kind of joined with Erebus Motorsport. There was no factory backing from Mercedes, but Erebus, run of course by Betty Klemenko, who was at that point just in the Australian GT Championship, purchased Stone Brothers Racing and decided to embark on a very ambitious first year in the category, having 3 cars driven by Lee Holdsworth, Tim Slade, and German driver Maro Engel, who's now making a bit of a name for himself in Formula E. But it was their first year. I don't think you can really put into words how sort of abysmal it was. Looking at the championship table from 2013, they finished. Lee Holdsworth was their highest placed finisher in 20th place out of 28 cars. Maro Engel was last in the championship, and Lee Holdsworth only achieved 2 top 5s all year, and Tim Slade, who finished 22nd, did not achieve any top 5s. So they really struggled in that first year. As I said, I think looking back on it now, Betty Klemenko would maybe enter with just 2 cars and probably not with the Mercedes. They didn't really stand much of a chance without factory backing. But going into 2014, they did make the decision to scale back to 2 cars with Lee Holdsworth and a big signing in Will Davison, who joined from Ford Performance Racing at the end of 2013. I think he was hoping to sort of embark on a bit of a Michael Schumacher Ferrari journey, in that he was hoping to take them from the back of the grid to the front and look like a bit of a hero. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, although they did take their first win in the category this year with Lee Holdsworth at Winton. He took, I think, his 3rd career win, and what was quite an emotional race for both of them. I don't think Lee Holdsworth has particularly held back in saying that his 2 years at Erebus were particularly difficult, and I'll get into why a bit later. Will Davison actually finished 14th in the championship in this year, 2014, which actually isn't a bad effort. It was definitely an improvement from where they were back at the start of 2013. But Lee Holdsworth again finished 20th in the championship. Of course, he took that win, but he had an absolutely brutal endurance season. Some of you might remember he had an appalling crash at Sandown where he went off at the now infamous corner at the end of the back straight at Sandown, where Todd Hazelwood had his massive crash last year. He went off and basically went head-on into the wall, causing a massive amount of damage on that car. And then at Bathurst, he was hit by Russell Ingall going into turn 2, and that car ended up on its roof. So he had quite a brutal time at Erebus with quite bad reliability, bad crashes, and he left next year to join Charlie Schwerkolt and the Walkinshaw customer outfit back when they were a 4-car operation. Will Davison, however, did stay on, and he was joined by Ash Walsh, who was a decent driver in Super 2, but he was mainly there for the money that he brought to the category. And I think we saw in 2014, in 2013, they had sponsors such as SP Tools and Irwin, who stayed on from the Stone Brothers days, but in 2014 they really struggled for sponsorship. And although they were able to get some for Will Davison in 2015, they needed money. They were really struggling, so they got Ashley Walsh in to drive the car. He finished effectively last in the championship. He didn't even see out the whole year. That's how sort of poor his performances was. Will Davison finished 15th in the championship. He did take probably one of the wins of his career in Perth, in a similar manner that we saw Scott McLaughlin win actually last weekend. He started in the midfield and came through the pack on fresh tyres to win that race. But overall, still, the Mercedes program was not really going anywhere, and this sort of signalled the beginning. It was the end of the Mercedes, but it was sort of the beginning of the Erebus rise as they switched to Holdens in 2016. Now, another big factor in Erebus's success today is of course David Reynolds, and he joined the team for the 2016 season. Will Davison left, cutting his 4-year deal 2 years short to join Techno, replacing Shane Van Gisbergen. And although at this point it looked like Erebus weren't going to go anywhere, it was clear from the outset that David Reynolds was a good fit for that team. He is a quirky individual, as we know. Betty Clemenco is a quirky individual. Will Davison never really seemed like he fit in that team. David Reynolds certainly did. And as I said before, this was the year that they ditched the Mercedes program and made the switch to Walkinshaw Holden Commodores. They were old chassis, but it gave them something that they knew could be competitive to work with. And looking at the numbers, David Reynolds finished 16th in the championship, which doesn't look too flash, but they progressively got better throughout the year, and that culminated in a podium for them in the last race of the championship. Erebus was still struggling for money though, as in the second car they had Aaron Russell, who, as we saw, didn't deserve to be in the category. He was there just because he could provide a second car. He was effectively a satellite sort of customer car. He brought his own car and his own sponsorship. His results were abysmal. He was replaced towards the end of the year by Shea Davies, another guy who, he's a bit of a magnet for crashes. They're all pretty much his fault. He didn't deserve to be there, but the main thing is David Reynolds was showing potential. They had a consistent sponsor with Penrite, who is still with them today, and this was the rise. And then, of course, last year we saw them really start to hit their potential. Now, I think the biggest factor in their success last year was the fact that they actually took the effort to build their own chassis. They made their own car, and this seemed to work out really well for them. Of course, David Reynolds finished 7th in the championship last year, a really strong result. He was pretty much best of the rest behind the Shell guys, the Red Bull guys, and the Tickford guys. And of course, one of the biggest achievements in Australian motorsport they achieved when they won Bathurst, and it wasn't a lucky win. This was on pace. David Reynolds qualified P2 with a fantastic lap in the shootout, only beaten by Scott McLaughlin, who, of course, his qualifying form last year was unstoppable, and they had really good pace. And Luke Yulden, his co-driver, after the race, described the team as a team of misfits, and this was, it may sound like an insult, but this was actually quite a compliment for them. Of course, David Reynolds shuffled out from ProDrive, where he didn't really fit in. Alistair McVeigh, his engineer, they obviously have a really good rapport. He was shuffled out from the Holden Racing team. Luke Yulden, formerly a co-driver for DJR, which is now, of course, Team Penske, he was shuffled out from there. They've all come together to make what is now a proper championship challenging team, and I personally could not be happy for them. Looking back where they were in 2013, where they were pretty much the laughing stock of the field, and now here they are, mixing it with the big guns like Triple Eight and Penske and Tickford, and really sticking it to them. Like, as we saw, David Reynolds, already a race winner this year, probably should have won the Clipsal 500 or the Adelaide 500, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing David Reynolds challenge for a championship again, and there is no one else I'd rather see him do it with than Erebus. So I hope you've enjoyed this video on Erebus Motorsport. It's been a little bit different for me. I wasn't able to actually watch the races at Barbagallo live, but I still wanted to talk about something, and this seemed like an appropriate time to give a shout out to Erebus Motorsport and the progress they've made. So I hopefully will be covering the rest of the Supercar season, and until my next video, I will catch you later.